Okay, folks, so I want to share some more information here from this research paper that was presented to the Air Force back in 1996. Right there it says, Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025. And now I've pretty much gone through just about all of the chapters, and I want to go through some the final chapters and some of the information concerning their investigation recommendations. And more specifically, there's like a little graphic in here that kind of shows what their objectives or what their wish list at the time, so to speak, would be on what they saw, how they would get there. But I want to share again, too, there's this story here resurfacing about this highly radioactive spill near the Columbia River in East Washington is worse than expected. And now this was an article that was put up June 29th, and this was like a current updated. Here is the news article that was put up by Northwest News Network, published back on November 17th of 2010. So 13 years ago they discovered this first, right? Highly radioactive soil found under building near the Columbia River. Yeah. Richland, Washington. Hanford Nuclear Reservation officials say they don't know how much radioactive contaminated soil they are dealing with yet. What they do know is the newly discovered radioactive dirt exceeds lethal limits and is not far from the Columbia River in the city of Richland. The contaminated soil is under a research building used to study reprocessing of radioactive fuel for about 30 years. That's kind of interesting. It's a research building used to study the reprocessing of radioactive fuel for the last 30 years, okay? But it's interesting because in the current findings, they found strontium. So I think that's kind of curious. That's why I wanted to share it again, because strontium has been used for geoengineering and weather modification for a very long time as well. So I find it curious that this news story here is surfacing about this. Were they really studying and the reprocessing of radioactive fuel, or has this been like a supply area for their little weather modification operations? I mean, I gotta wonder, right? Strontium. There was a place in the floor where radioactive waste was collected and drained, and there was a leak there. Now the federal government and its cleanup contractor, Washington Closure Hanford, are trying to figure out what to do about it. Todd Nelson is with the contractor. He says that there's about 8,900 rad per hour down there. That's about 11 times the lethal dose. However, it does not represent any danger to workers or the environment, given the fact it's underneath a building. There are no workers working above it. Obviously, there is a concrete slab above it as well, but Nelson says his company doesn't believe the contamination has made its way to the water table. He says the company isn't sure yet how to clean it up and what it will cost. And this was 13 years ago when they were talking about it having 8,900 rads per hour. So 13 years it's been leaking, and they're going to try to say that it hasn't made its way into some kind of natural resource being used by the public. Yeah, I don't know, folks. That's kind of fishy to me. It seems like a very interesting story. So this is the current article here that was published. Highly radioactive spill near the Columbia River in East Washington is worse than expected. Published June 29th, 2023. Richland, Washington. The spill of highly radioactive waste beneath a building on the Hanford Nuclear Reservation north of Richland and near the Columbia River is both deeper and broader than anticipated. And it took you 13 years to figure that out? I mean, in a statement Thursday, the Department of Energy said the contamination in the soil at the Hanford 324 building, 1,000 feet from the Columbia River and a mile north of Richland, is much larger, in quotation marks, than previously identified. Wow. Yeah. Here's where it gets kind of interesting. Now the Department of Energy is rethinking the cleanup for the spill discovered 13 years ago, with work crews making preparations for the excavation of the radioactive material over the past 6 years. Well, it's taken you 6 years just to make the preparations for it? I mean, come on. Really? Is this for real? Come on. Now, listen to this. The spill of cesium and strontium in the soil beneath the 324 building is so radioactively hot that it would be lethal to a worker on direct contact within 2 minutes, the Department of Energy has said previously. Now, that's kind of curious, because isn't strontium what they use for some of their weather modification projects and stuff? Hasn't that been detected? I mean, could it all just be coming from this East Washington building? I mean, what exactly really is going on here? Radioactivity in the contaminated soil has been measured at 8,900 rad per hour. That's what I said in the previous article there that was published 13 years ago. 11 times the lethal dose limit? Come on. The plan has been to leave the 324 building standing to act as a barrier to prevent precipitation from reaching the underground contamination and driving it closer to the groundwater, which moves toward the Columbia River. Work began in 2017 to stabilize the building and the soil beneath it so a remotely controlled excavator could be used within the building to dig up the highly contaminated soil beneath it. Interesting. And anything else that might be below there too, right? Might as well do a little mining while you're at it. Now, the DOE is considering a more costly and time-consuming cleanup plan that calls for tearing down the approximately 58-year-old building and building a containment superstructure over the waste site and then digging up the contaminated soil. The details of the new plan have not been worked out. Well, how about that? They just want to tear down the building that's there and then put up their own little superstructure and make sure that they put up lots and lots of signs telling everybody it's dangerous and radioactive and to keep out, right? Would this be along the same lines of them taking control of that property and that immediate area around it? I mean, you know, for the public's health and safety, right? Yeah, the DOE is discussing the possible new cleanup plan with its regulator on the project, the Environmental Protection Agency, because we all know the EPA is on the up and up, right? The spill has not reached the groundwater, where it would travel underground the short distance to the Columbia River, based on data from monitoring wells, the DOE said Thursday. Really? After 13 years, after it was even discovered, there's no additional, you know, I mean, come on. 324 building was used for research. The building at the south edge of the 580 square mile Hanford Nuclear Reservation in eastern Washington is in the site's 300 area, where uranium fuel was fabricated for Hanford reactors that produced plutonium for the nation's nuclear weapons program from World War II through the Cold War. Interesting. The Hanford 300 area also was used for research. Wasn't that special? And the 102,000 square foot 324 building was used for research and other projects with highly radioactive material from 1966 to 1996. It was scheduled to be demolished by a legal deadline of September 2015, but as preparations were being made for demolition in 2010, the spill beneath the building was discovered. Wow. In the 1980s, one of the building's 6 hot cells was being used to prepare concentrated radioactive cesium and strontium from Hanford plutonium production waste for Germany to use for testing of a repository for radioactive waste. Well, interesting. There's an interesting little twist. Germany, huh? For Germany. To use. Hanford workers stood outside the hot cell and used controls to operate manipulators within the 30-foot tall hot cell with 5-foot thick walls as they watched through leaded glass windows. At the time of the work for Germany, the stainless steel liner on the floor of the hot cell was damaged, allowing the concentrated high-level waste to leak into the soil beneath the building. Really? Who was responsible for damaging it? Do we know that information? The bottom of the cell is about 42 feet above groundwater. DOE planned to call the hot cell back into service to mount an excavator arm within it. The floor of the hot cell would be cut away with a remotely operated saw, and then the excavator would bring up the contaminated soil through the hot cell. Interesting. Using the hot cell was planned to would shield Hanford workers on the project from the radiation in the waste. Using the hot cell was planned to be used as a shield. I think is how that's supposed to be works. That just doesn't sound right. Using the hot cell was planned to would shield Hanford workers. Anyway, you understand it. Excavating contaminated soil with the building standing required 13 structural supports called micropiles to be installed in the soil beneath the building to stabilize its foundation. Interesting. Someone's getting a big fat robotics contract out of this whole project, huh? Radioactive spill discovered. After that was completed in the fall of 2022, the next step for DOE contractor Central Plateau Cleanup Company was to install underground horizontal supports into the soil outside the footprint of the building by injecting concrete-like grout into the soil to form blocks. The intent was to help prevent the sloughing of soil during excavation of contamination. As the work began, contaminated soil was discovered in a wider area beneath the building where it was not expected. So then that would mean that it spread and people were exposed, right? DOE paused work in April, and Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, the DOE National Laboratory in Richland, was called upon to help Hanford officials understand the extent of the underground contamination. PNNL confirmed the findings of the Hanford contractors that the spill was both broader and deeper than thought when the plan to excavate it from within the hot cell was developed. Work on that plan was initially done by previous DOE contractor CH2M Hill Plateau Remediation Company before its contract expired. Central Plateau Cleanup Company took over work near the start of 2021. Wow, you would think there would be a little bit more consistency. Why are they changing up so many? Why are they having so many different contracts? I mean, 13 years, people? Really? A much larger volume of contaminated soil would need to be removed than originally planned, PNNL concluded. The excavator arm to be mounted in the hot cell for excavation could not reach all the contaminated soil, with some of it deeper than it could reach. Wow. DOE began to rethink its cleanup plan for the spill, not only because of the larger excavation required, but also because of concerns about the aging building. Equipment failures there have highlighted the condition of the building and the cost to continue to maintain and do repairs there while using one of its hot cells to excavate waste. However, DOE said the building currently is in a safe and stable configuration. The contaminated soils at it have remained stable for decades, it said. Really? Wow. New plan for the Hanford spill. The new plan DOE is considering is intended to be safer for the workforce, protective of the environment, and effective in completing the mission, Hanford workers were told in an employee message Thursday. While this change in approach will take longer to complete, it represents a safer path to remediation and aligns with current budget profiles through fiscal year 2025, the message said. As a precaution, 2 new monitoring wells will be installed to continue to check for any underground spread of the cesium and strontium. Wow. So we're being exposed to the strontium from above and then below out there in Washington, huh? Up there in Washington. The proposed new cleanup plan would start with deactivating the 324 building, including fogging ventilation systems to stabilize contamination, filling the building's hot cells with grout, and turning off heat and power. Then the building would be torn down to its foundation and the slab of the foundation possibly extended. The extended slab would serve as a larger barrier to protect it from rain and snow melt that would drive the radioactive contamination deeper toward groundwater. Then a containment superstructure will be built over the waste site. The design of the superstructure has not started. With it in place, contaminated soil then would be dug up. Interesting. Yeah, so that's, to me, is a very curious story. And I'm definitely going to try to keep an eye on it. And like I said, I know there were already quite a few other channels and other people that have already covered it, but I wanted to mention it just mainly because of the strontium. Because it, that clearly has been used, and they've already confessed and said that they've used it for weather modification techniques, and it's been used in the, in the aerosols and everything. So, and it's been detected in our environment for a lot longer than just 13 years. So I gotta wonder really what was the research being done there for real. Anyway, back to this file here from the Weather as a Force Multiplier. This is Chapter 5 here in their investigation recommendations. And it's kind of curious what their plan and their goals were. They have a little chart here that I want to show you too. So, and they talk about how do we get there from here. And we're talking about back in 1996, okay? To fully appreciate the development of the specific operational capabilities weather modification could deliver to the warfighter, we must examine and understand their relationship to associated core competencies and the development of their requisite technologies. Figure 5.1 combines the specific operational capabilities of Table 1 into 6 core capabilities and depicts their relative importance over time. This is their long-term plans. For example, fog and cloud modification are currently important and will remain so for some time to come to conceal our assets from surveillance or improve landing visibility at airfields. However, as surveillance assets become less optically dependent, meaning they can see through the fogs instead of having to dissipate it, right? Yeah. Anyway, where was I at? Damn it. How I become less optically dependent, and aircraft achieve a truly global all-weather landing capability, fog and cloud modification applications become less important. And you'll see that in that chart when I show that to you. In contrast, artificial weather technologies do not currently exist. Bullshit. They existed back there in 1996, too. But as they are developed, the importance of their potential applications rises rapidly. For example, the anticipated proliferation of surveillance technologies in the future will make the ability to deny surveillance increasingly valuable. In such an environment, clouds made of smart particles, such as described in Chapter 4, could provide a premium capability. And I covered smart particles in a previous video because I was showing some of the articles and information coming from Saudi Arabia, too. Because they claim that they have smart dust, and they're using smart dust to see their clouds over there. But anyway, this is one of the charts here. It's one of the graphics, and you can see here. Let me back out just a little bit to show the full chart. You can see here. This is how they project it here. That precipitation modification, that's PM, that's going to go up by 2025. And we're going to see this is fog and cloud. Okay, fog and cloud modification, F and C and M's, fog and M. Then they show the little chart here with their little thing going down. That's gonna go away once they develop more technologies for like detecting through the clouds and stuff, right? But it'll still serve some level of importance because they can then use it to disrupt the enemy, right? Yeah. Anyway, SWM space weather, which is the space weather modification, is gonna go way up, and you can see CW, the counter weather, which would be to counter the enemy, right? That's going to go way up by 2025. Here's your precipitation modification is going to go up. Your storm modification, SM, is going to go up. And your AW, your artificial weather, is going to go up by 2025, according to their little core competency roadmap to weather modification in 2025. Okay, this is their projection, right? Even today's most technologically advanced militaries would usually prefer to fight in clear weather and blue skies. But as warfighting technologies proliferate, the side with a technological advantage will prefer to fight in weather that gives them an edge. So they might as well just create the weather, right? The U.S. Army has already alluded to this approach in their concept of owning the weather. Accordingly, storm modification will become more valuable over time. The importance of precipitation modification is also likely to increase as usable water sources become more scarce in volatile parts of the world. And more contaminated, right? Yeah, they do say usable water sources. As more countries pursue, develop, and exploit increasing types and degrees of weather modification technologies, we must be able to detect their efforts and counter their activities when necessary. As depicted, the technologies and capabilities associated with such a counter-weather role will become increasingly important. Yep, remember their chart. They say the CW is going to become increasingly more important. The importance of space weather modification will grow with time. Its rise will be more rapid at first as the technologies it can best support are negate proliferate at their fastest rates. Later, as those technologies mature or become obsolete, the importance of space weather modification will continue to rise, but not as rapidly. To achieve the core capabilities depicted in Figure 5.1, the necessary technologies and systems might be developed according to the process depicted in 5.2. This figure illustrates the system's development timing and sequence necessary to realize a weather modification capability for the battle space by 2025. The horizontal axis represents time. The vertical axis indicates the degree to which a given technology will be applied toward weather modification. As the primary users, the military will be the main developer for the technologies designated with an asterisk. The civil sector will be the main source for the remaining technologies. And here's the chart here. I'll show you. Back out just a little bit more there. Yeah, you can see. Here's the legend here that shows the different ones. And you can see your GWN here is your global weather network, your sensors, your comp mod is your computer modeling, and your communications. That's going to be tied into your world weather, your global weather system that I've talked about before, and your weather force support element. And your VRWX is your virtual weather. Okay, that's what it says down here. VRWX is your virtual weather. That's going to be one of their main focuses according to their little chart here. Their systems, their technologies to be developed by the DoD are marked with the asterisks. And you can see that's your virtual weather. And that's your weather force support element is going to be mainly the military. And now here's what I'm getting to. One of the main reasons why I wanted to show this this graphics here too, and present this chapter 5 too. They talk about your chem, and your chems are your chemicals. Your ADV is going to be your aerospace delivery vehicles. You notice that's that second here on their timeline and their importance, and they're saying that's going to level out there for a while, and then it's going to increase, and it's going to level back out again. And that's your space, your aerospace delivery vehicles, okay? And now here's a good one right here. DE. Well, what does DE stand for? I wonder what. Directed energy. And again, it has the asterisk that's going to be developed by the DoD. They're wanting and saying here, directed energy is going to be of great importance. And then you have AIM, which is going to be your artificial ionospheric mirrors. I talked about that from the previous chapters. Actually, I think I did at least 3 different videos talking about their artificial ionospheric mirrors and HAARP being involved in that. And you can see here it's got the asterisk, and you can see it's going to have great importance there. I mean, that one's going to like just skyrocket and go right off the chart, okay? And the SC is your smart clouds and your nanotechnology. And you notice that doesn't have an asterisk, okay? Because that's being developed by the private sector. And they give that a great importance, just off the charts, of their opinion and their view back then in 1996 of how important and relevant that it's going to be. And I do believe that they are absolutely playing around with directed energies, folks. With some of the stuff that I've captured around here, I mean, let's not forget about this here. You know, and we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of when this thing here popped off and appeared. And, like, pretty much just fried itself on one of the higher, high-powered lines that we have running through the valley here. So, yeah, they're playing around with the directed energy, and they have been for a bit of time now. That's not the only one. I got to show y'all that, too. I know that you guys have already seen some of these here from my one report. But this was, you know, we're coming up on the anniversary of this one, too. This was on July 27th that I captured this thing here, popping off this weird plasma-looking thing here. And then this here. This was kind of a curious series of captures here, too, in this video. They capture the outline of this here. So don't tell me that they're not playing around with directed energy, especially when I'm seeing more and more of these solar fields popping off. And let's absolutely not forget the freaking Tesla coil thing that was popped off back on August 11th here. This is directing energy. This was man-made. And this is unedited, okay? This was not a natural, what they call ball lightning. This was their attempts at controlling and directing energy, and something went seriously wrong, in my opinion, because this did damage. This did damage to our side yard, and I'm willing to bet that there was other people that had some kind of level of damage from this as well at the time. They just didn't understand exactly what was going on. But they're definitely playing around with it. So when I look at this chart here and I see that they have directed energy and these artificial ionospheric mirrors highlighted, and then this smart clouds and nanotechnology highlighted as something that's gonna be of high priority. Yeah, and then I aim my camera around the skies and I capture some of the things that I've captured. Yeah, don't tell me they are not playing around with this stuff and trying to play Zeus. Here are their conclusions. And again, this is their figure 5.2 that shows a systems development roadmap to weather modification in 2025. And they are definitely following this roadmap here. I have a problem with the whole smart clouds and stuff too, and this nanotechnology. We really have no idea what's being blown in and what's being hidden in all of that wildfire smoke from Canada either, folks. So you might want to be a little bit more cautious about exposing yourself to it, and now actually might be the time to get masks. I'm just saying, I hate to be the one to say anything about that, but maybe we should be wearing masks, at least to filter out some of these particulates and this bullshit that they're putting into our atmosphere, right? Yeah. Anyway, here are their conclusions. The world's finite resources and continued needs will drive the desire to protect people and property and more efficiently use our croplands, forests, and rangelands. The ability to modify the weather may be desirable both for economic and defense reasons. The global weather system has been described as a series of spheres or bubbles. Interesting choice of words. Pushing down on one causes another to pop up. We need to know when another power pushes on a sphere in their region and how that will affect either our own territory or areas of economic and political interest to the U.S. So in other words, your modification is having widespread effects that you really can't control unless you communicate with the other countries and the people running that territory in that region, right? Efforts are already underway to create more comprehensive weather models, primarily to improve forecasts. But researchers are also trying to influence the results of these models by adding small amounts of energy at just the right time and space. These programs are extremely limited at the moment and are not yet validated, but there is great potential to improve them in the next 30 years. The lessons of history indicate a real weather modification capability will eventually exist despite the risks. Well, thanks for getting public's consent, right? The drive exists. People have always wanted to control the weather, and their desire will compel them to collectively and continuously pursue their goal. The motivation exists. The potential benefits and power are extremely lucrative and alluring for those who have the resources to develop it. Boy, that is a loaded freaking sentence right there, isn't it? The potential benefits and power are extremely lucrative and alluring for those who have the resources to develop it. This combination of drive, motivation, and resources will eventually produce the technology. History also teaches that we cannot afford to be without a weather modification capability once the technology is developed and used by others. It's for our own good, right? Even if we have no intention of using it, others will. To call upon the atomic weapon analogy again, we need to be able to deter or counter the capability with our own. Therefore, the weather and intelligence communities must keep abreast of the actions of others. Yeah, but, we got to make sure, though, that we coordinate with them on the global weather network and the global weather system to make sure that, they're not doing anything that would damage us. But we got to, this is so ridiculous how much they have gotten away with for so long. As the preceding chapters have shown, weather modification is a force multiplier with tremendous power that could be exploited across the full spectrum of warfighting environments, from enhancing friendly operations or disrupting those of the enemy via small-scale tailoring of natural weather patterns to complete dominance of global communications and counter-space control. Weather modification offers the warfighter a wide range of possible options to defeat or coerce an adversary, but while offensive weather modification efforts would certainly be undertaken by U.S. forces with great caution and trepidation, it is clear that we cannot afford to allow an adversary to obtain an exclusive weather modification capability. Yeah, that's why there's people from every country listed on some of these patents, right? Because it's always going to be there. Because you gotta constantly develop and do this stuff to protect us from our adversaries while you're working with our adversaries to develop these technologies, right? This is kind of an interesting little chapter here, too, on why is the ionosphere important? I wonder why. The ionosphere is a part of the Earth's atmosphere beginning at an altitude of about 30 miles and extending outward 1,200 miles or more. This region consists of layers of free, electrically charged particles that transmit, refract, and reflect radio waves, allowing those waves to be transmitted great distances around the Earth. The interaction of the ionosphere on impinging electromagnetic radiation depends on the properties of the ionospheric layer, the geometry of transmission, and the frequency of the radiation. For any given signal path through the atmosphere, a range of workable frequency bands exists. This range between the maximum usable frequency, or MUF, and its lowest usable frequency, LUF, is where radio waves are reflected and refracted by the ionosphere, such as a partial mirror may reflect or refract visible light. Yeah, it's kind of important, right? And a very useful tool. The reflective and refractive properties of the ionosphere provide a means to transmit radio signals beyond direct line of sight transmission between a transmitter and receiver. Ionospheric reflection and refraction has therefore been used almost exclusively for long-range HF from 3 to 30 megahertz communications. Radio waves with frequencies ranging from above 30 megahertz to 300 gigahertz are usually used for communications requiring line-of-sight transmissions, such as satellite communications. At these higher frequencies, radio waves propagate through the ionosphere with only a small fraction of the wave scattering back in a pattern analogous to a skywave. Communicators receive significant benefit from using these frequencies since they provide considerably greater bandwidths and thus have greater data carrying capacity. They are also less prone to natural interference or noise. Although the ionosphere acts as a natural mirror for HF radio waves, it is in a constant state of flux, and thus its mirror property can be limited at times. Like terrestrial weather, ionospheric properties change from year to year, from day to day, and even from hour to hour. This ionospheric variability, called space weather, can cause unreliability in ground and space-based communications that depend on ionospheric reflection or transmission. Space weather variability affects how the ionosphere attenuates, absorbs, reflects, refracts, and changes the propagation, phase, and amplitude characteristics of radio waves. These weather-dependent changes may arise from certain space weather conditions, such as 1. Variability of solar radiation entering the upper atmosphere, 2. The solar plasma entering the Earth's magnetic field, 3. The gravitational atmospheric tides produced by the sun and moon, and 4. The vertical swelling of the atmosphere due to daytime heating of the sun. Space weather is also significantly affected by solar flare activity. The tilt of the Earth's geomagnetic field and abrupt ionospheric changes result from events such as geomagnetic storms. The tilt, huh? Now, is it an actual tilt, or is it just an illusion created by reflection and refraction and information and data being bounced off of that ceiling? I gotta wonder, right? In summary, the ionosphere's inherent reflectivity is a natural gift that humans have used to create long-range communications connecting distant points on the globe. Right, there's that word. However, natural variability in the ionosphere reduces the reliability of our communication systems that depend on ionospheric reflection and refraction. So you might as well take control of it then, right? Primarily HF. For the most part, higher frequency communications such as UHF, SHF, and EHF bands are transmitted through the ionosphere without distortion. However, these bands are also subject to degradation caused by ionospheric scintillation, a phenomenon induced by abrupt variations in electron density along the signal path, resulting in signal fade caused by rapid signal path variations and defocusing of the signal's amplitude and/or phase. Understanding and predicting ionospheric variability and its influence on the transmission and reflection of electromagnetic radiation has been a much-studied field of scientific inquiry for a very long time. Right? It's what they say. Improving our ability to observe, model, and forecast space weather will substantially improve our communication systems, both ground and space-based. Considerable work is being conducted, both within the DoD and the commercial sector, on improving observation, modeling, and forecasting of space weather. While considerable technical challenges remain, we assume for the purposes of this study that dramatic improvements will occur in these areas over the next several decades. At least that's their wish list, right? Yeah. Okay, so this video here is really long. I'll probably do one last one yet on this weather as a force multiplier, and I'll go into this information from Appendix B and their research to better understand and predict ionospheric effects. And with that, I'll also share a little bit more of the information that I have on HAARP and the progress that HAARP has made over the last few decades as well. So that's going to conclude this video here for this part, but I'll definitely go into more from this appendix here as well, from Appendix B. And I do still want to share this information, more of this information, and I want to go into this hail suppression impacts and issues file from 1977 and share just a bit more information yet from that report to Congress from 1979 as well. So I'm still doing that, and I'm still trying to do some more research into this whole thing on science fiction novels. So if anybody has, any science fiction novels or anything that they know of that's been published since like 2018, that would have anything to do with like stars and planets and with naturally derived diseases and viruses and stuff like that might involve all of that kind of matched in and blocked in, leave me a comment and let me know, because I'm still doing research into some other science fiction novels and stuff just to build up my comparison chart on whether or not my science fiction novel would have been received by the public or not very well. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. Know that I appreciate it and that you matter very much to me. And please stay mindful. There's so much going on. There's so many distractions right now too, including this these recent publications and news stories concerning this highly radioactive spill in East Washington, folks. I'm definitely going to be looking for more updates because strontium is involved here. That's a very interesting little twist to the storyline, if you ask me. But anyway, because I'm repetitive, I gotta say it again. Thank you very much for watching, and know that I appreciate it and that you matter very much to me. Please stay safe and mindful.
We've got the generators in place, both north and south. We've got generators on Charleston, the Rubies here, and they're ready. We had the program stood up and has been there for 10 years. They're ready. We had the program stood up and has been there for 10 years.
Has been there for 10 years.
If we get it front through, we need to seat it. Any technical questions, because I just know what they look like. The generators, that is. Thank you. If we get it front through, we need to seat it. If we get it front through, we need to seat it.
If we get it front through, we need to seat it.
Calls for us taking the steps now that will make us no longer second in space and in size. It lays the predicate and the foundation for a space communication satellite that will permit the people of the world to see one television program at the same time throughout the world. Think about that kind of communication, and think about the opportunity that will provide. It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite